Well, today we are starting a series called Life Hacks, as you just saw in that bumper. And if you didn't know what life hacks were, I think that little video probably made clear to you the way we use that word. Now we're going to use it to talk about this next section in Jesus' most famous teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. If you've been with us for the last few weeks, you know we're intentionally going through this really important, most visual part of Jesus' section of his teaching to his disciples. And we finished a series on that last week, and this is the beginning of the next part. Now, just in case you haven't been with us, I want to try to catch you up, just so you don't check out and think, well, I won't really understand anything. I can get you there really quick. Jesus came with one really big overriding message, and it's generally not the one you hear. It's not how to get to heaven when you die. Jesus doesn't talk about that. Instead, what Jesus talks about is that heaven has come to earth, that the power and presence of God, the kingdom of heaven, is available, and that you should change your mind. You should repent, that's what that means, and you should believe that good news, that the power and presence of God is available. And then he makes clear it's available to everyday people like you and me, people that thought it would never be available to them, that God's power and presence is not available somewhere in the future. It's available to you now for living your everyday life in his power and presence. Last week, Jason did such a great job of ending up that section by telling us that Jesus isn't giving a new set of rules of how to live to be under some kind of new law. Instead, he's saying that if we live in the power and presence of God, that our job is to live so in the kingdom of God, to live in his power and presence, that we live in his love and his goodness and his generosity and his mercy, that we become so filled with that kind of thing that it just pours out of us because we're just full of it. Our job is just to be full of it. Some of you are thinking for the very first time in your life, hey, I've accomplished my job. I have been told my whole life, hey, man, you're full of it. Let's just be clear. They weren't telling you you had become what God wanted you to be. They were just noting what Jesus is saying in a way. They saw what had flowed out of you, and then they told you what you were full of. And the way that you change what's flowing out of you, it's not by cutting off the flow so that people don't see it. Instead, it's allow God to fill you with his goodness and love and presence and his power, that what flows out of you, is the love and power and presence of God, because you're just full of that. Well, today we're going to start this next section, and we're going to talk about a topic, because Jesus, in this section that we're calling Life Hacks, he gives the kingdom way, the power and presence God way of dealing with just common, every ordinary kind of things, or Jesus life hacks. You see what we're doing there with that phrase. And today he goes at one that is really, really important for all of us. He talks about anger. In fact, anger has almost become a cultural norm for us. Anger and outrage seems to be a part of our everyday life. And because it's an everyday kind of norm, it's almost become so normal that we can notice it in other people. We see it around us, but it's hard for us to see it in ourselves and admit it. We can see it everywhere around us. We point it out all the time, how angry everyone is, but it's hard because it's so culturally normal now for us to see it in ourselves. So before we can make much progress on hearing what Jesus has to say, we need to become clean with ourselves and admit to each other how much anger is really a part of our life. So I want to start by giving you a chance to do some self-evaluation, to step out of the cultural norm and admit to yourselves and people around you how angry you really are. So what I'm going to do is I want to just give us a little self-evaluation. You don't have to say this out loud to anybody. I just want you to self-evaluate for a second. I want you to take maybe the program you have, turn it over to the next note section, grab the pen that's on the chair right there by you, and I want you to just number 1 through 4, and I'm going to give you an opportunity, just yes or no. Would the scenario I paint, would you find yourself being frustrated or miffed or tiffed or angry? Would any of these situations cause anger to rise up in you? You just keep score yourself, yes or no. Here we go. You unpack the new TV or appliance or phone or computer, the new gadget that you just purchased. You get it out of its box, and you notice it doesn't work. You call customer service, and you get put on hold. Are you angry? Yes or no? You're working with a repairman. You've called him to fix something, or you've taken something to him, and you can tell that he has you a little bit over a barrel. You don't know so much. You know something's wrong, but you don't know for sure how to fix it. That's why you came to him, and you believe he's probably overcharging you, but there is nothing you can do about it. Tiffed a little bit? Frustrated a little? You've come home at the end of a long day, a long commute. You're waiting in traffic, and you're at a traffic light, and then your car stalls just as the light turned green. As you're trying to get your car started, the guy behind you lays on his horn. He just keeps honking. When he finally decides to pull around you, he stops briefly and yells, "Hey, where did you learn to drive? Move that piece of junk." Are you angry? You've been invited to church, and already there's been music that you didn't know. They asked you to give personal information, which feels really too personal since you just met them. And now there's a guy standing up droning on and on like he could go on for an hour. Does it make you angry, even though he's an exceptionally attractive older man? See, the truth is, it's really hard for us to admit that there are normal situations that I get angry. I get frustrated. I lose it occasionally. In fact, even the way we talk about our anger, our temper, we try to downplay what a big deal it is. In fact, if I'm talking to my friends and I know there's been a situation where I got angry, I'll say something happened to my temper. What is it that happened to my temper? I lost it. You know, I was just there and everything was okay, and then all of a sudden I looked around and that slippery little thing, it just slipped away. Slippery little guy, my temper, it just got away. I lost it. And of course I can't be blamed because everybody loses stuff. I just lost it. We downplay the importance of it because it's a part of who we are. Well, I have been looking forward to teaching on this topic ever since I knew we were doing this series. I knew that I wanted to be the one to talk to you about anger. Not because I knew it would be so relevant and I knew what a cultural norm it was, and not because I know the teaching of Jesus and I know how to explain it to you, but because there has never been anybody that needed to apply these words more than me. Hello, my name is Ed, and I have an anger problem. In fact, the truth about me is that for the vast majority of my life, anger has been the fuel that my life has run on. The bad things of my life have all flowed out of anger. Now, I haven't always admitted that that was the problem. I've often pointed to other people and to other situations, and I pointed out how they were the problems in my life. But when I finally came right down to it, I had to admit they were not my problem. I was my problem. See, we tend to divide the world into two categories. There are people that they have a problem with anger, and then there are normal people like me. But Jesus, when he divided the world into two groups, he'd see people as people who had problems, and they knew they had problems, and people who had problems, and they didn't know they had problems. And for many of us, we live in a culture of rage, and we have a problem. We have a problem with anger, but we don't know we have a problem. And the place to begin is for you and I to begin to admit, I need to understand what Jesus has to say. So today, I look forward to exploring with you these words of Jesus. These amazing, but often initially confusing, his life hack for dealing with our anger. This is what he has to say. And I just want to read this whole section to you straight out. It'll come on the screen, verse by verse. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anybody who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there you remember that your brother or sister has something to say to you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go, be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on your way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. Anger is this universal human problem. And so Jesus begins to explain to us how kingdom living works in this area of anger. If we're going to be right and we're going to handle this right, we have to understand what he has to say. Now, if you imagine in our day that the rich and the powerful, they do pretty much, you think, whatever they want. Imagine in ancient world where there are no police forces, there are no universally accepted kind of laws. Imagine what rich and powerful people did in their day. In fact, one way of characterizing ancient history was everyone did whatever they thought was right in their own mind. And boy, did it look like it. And the weak and the vulnerable and you, if you got in their way, you were the one that got hurt. So when God began to try to move this mess that humans had made of creation back toward where he wanted it, he knew that eventually he had to get to what was his ultimate law, the law of love, that we would take and look out for each other. But where he has to start with that mess is he has to begin to protect the weak and the vulnerable. So he says to his people, the nation of Israel, here's a command for you. You shall not murder. Hey, you have to stop going around murdering each other. Well, people being what we are, people began to understand that. And they'd look at the law and they'd begin to say, oh, I get it. There are good people and there are bad people. And good people, they obey the law, and there are bad people that break the law. So there are murderers and non-murderers. There are good people and there are bad people. And if you want to know if somebody's a good person, good people don't kill anyone. So I haven't killed anyone, so I am good to go. But of course, you and I know that if your child brings someone to your attention that they love, that they want to spend their life with, and you ask them, so what kind of person they are, they go, well, they don't kill anybody. You know that there's more to it than that. And Jesus goes to that more that you and I know intuitively must be there. So when he begins to describe what someone looks like who's living in the kingdom with this universal problem of anger, he goes at it first. And then he goes from there to sexuality, and then he goes from there to how relationships break down and the damage that happens there, and then he goes to truth-telling and to more, this section of life hacks. And I want to take a break here just for a second, and I want to talk to you about the next 2 weeks. As I said, today we're starting at the first one of anger, and then next week we'll talk about sexuality, and the week after that, relational breakdown. Particularly, Jesus talks about divorce. I know because of the nature of our culture and our church that these next 2 weeks are just as important as what I'm talking to you about today. Because of our culture and our church, we desperately need, all of us need to hear what Jesus has to say about sexuality and the breakdown of relationships and the pain that surrounds them. I know that you need to be here. And so here's what I want to ask you to do. I want to ask you to be here. I'm not saying to you, I want you to watch the teaching that'll eventually be online. I know some of you, when you can't be here, you do that. I think that's fine. But the next 2 weeks, I need you to plan to be here in your seat on time for the whole service. See, this won't just be about what gets said. Because these subjects are so important, we tried to plan the whole service so that there's going to be impact around all of this so that we can get what is really important for our culture. I want you to experience it all. I want you to hear it in full. I think that God has something planned important for us for the next 2 weeks. So if you have to change your plans, which most of us often can, I want you to be here in your seat on time the next 2 weeks. In addition to that, I want to say to you, because of the nature of these two topics, sexuality and particularly relational breakdown surrounding family and divorce, if you normally bring a child with you into the adult service that's fifth grade or under, I want to ask you to allow them, when you make plans to be here, allow them to enjoy our children's ministry for those 2 weeks. It'll be a great experience for them. Everything that we'll taught will be age appropriate for them. They will understand it, and it will help them in their spiritual life. I'm not confident that by what they will hear here, that it will be understandable to them or that it will be helpful to them. And because they might be a distraction to you, because this is so culturally tense in our world, you might not get the impact as well. So I want you to be here for those two important topics, and I want you to allow your kids to enjoy children's ministry if they're 5th grade and under. So Jesus begins with anger, and then sexuality and divorce and truth-telling and on. And often people, when they read this section that we're calling life hacks, they'll think, I just went in a random kind of order. But the best thinking on that he is not going in random order. And the reason for that is because anger is the number one spiritual blockage for human beings. It's our number one problem. Now, why is anger our number one problem? Well, because it gets at my kingdom, at your kingdom. It hits right at it. As I explained a couple of weeks ago, my kingdom is where my will is done, where what I want gets done. And my will it's an energy. It's my ability to initiate, to have things the way I want them. My will is the energy that carries that out. What's anger? Anger is my spontaneous response when my will gets interrupted. Anger is my spontaneous, in the moment response when my will wants something done, doesn't get what it's want. It's my will saying to me, hey, something's in my way of getting my way. Well, we are to live in the kingdom of God. Jesus knows that my will, having my way, is going to be an issue, and anger is the first response to that. See, our will is an energy, and anger is a form of energy. The purpose of anger is that it alerts me something needs to be fixed. I need to do something to fix it. It maybe fix me, maybe fix something else, but I need to fix something. Anger is a response to that. It alerts me to that. But in our world, the way we see it is anger quickly moves from something I need to fix to something that I need to get out of the way of me getting what I want. So I'm running late for work, and I'm trying to get dressed, and I'm at the point of putting my shoes on, and I reach down to tie my shoes, and in the middle of it, my shoestring breaks. And my initial thought is, stupid shoestring. Now, I'm a smart person. I know that a shoestring can't be stupid because a shoestring also can't be smart. But my initial response to my will being thwarted in that moment is, stupid shoestring. Well, you and I know that our world isn't set up to live out my will, nor your will. That is not the way the world is supposed to operate, is to always go according to my will. And that most of the time, it's not just stupid shoestrings or a stupid door or stupid car that thwarts my will. It's what? It's stupid people. It's people. It's people that get in my way. It's often in the middle of that my initial response is that stupid person. Of course, now you get with the problem of where this becomes a huge spiritual issue. Jesus is not concerned. It's not my emotion. It's not the feeling of anger that Jesus is worried about. That is a completely initial, spontaneous response that is natural to all human beings. It's not even my getting frustrated in the moment that my will has been thwarted. It's that my will has now been turned against another person. See, in that moment, I want to believe that they're stupid and that anything bad that happens to them, they deserve to have happened to them. That's why Jesus makes so clear that everyone, the highest value in the kingdom life, the highest value of being filled with the power and presence of God, it's love for God and for the other person. So anything that leads me to stop willing the good of the other person. See, love is me to will. It's not something I feel toward the other person. Love is me willing the good of the other person. And that's why anything that gets in the way of me willing the good of the other person, that's a problem for me spiritually. That's why he's so concerned with anger. You have heard that it was said, anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who's angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Did you notice that Jesus is deliberately paralleling these two things? That he's giving them the same consequences? Anyone who murders is subject to judgment. Anyone who's angry is subject to judgment. They are equal. Really? Murder and anger? They're equal? How could that be possible? See, as soon as I begin to indulge my anger, I stop willing the good of the other person and that I'm angry at. I stop wanting their good. As soon as I stop willing the good of the other person, again, this is not a feeling. As soon as I stop willing the good of the other person, I move from wanting to love them, which is to will the good for them, to wanting my own will. And everything that moves me outside the will of God is evil, and God always judges it. And God's will is that we would will the good of each other. I'm choosing my kingdom and my will, and I'm thwarting God's will by not willing the good of the people that are around me. And because anger, as it begins to grow, it moves to the next section where I begin to justify not only willing the good of the other, but I begin to want to do harm to the other person. And because it begins to build up in me, it eventually flows out of me because I'm full of anger. It moves to contempt, and it leaks out in all kinds of ways. See, when I indulge my anger never stays buried. It never stays that way very long. It leaks out, and it begins in my words and my deeds. And Jesus gives us two examples. He says, anyone who says Raka is answerable to the Sanhedrin, but anyone who says you fool is in danger of the fires of hell. Now, Raka was an insult of their day, and actually Hebrews didn't say it the way that I said it. It was Raka. And it's actually one of those words that the sound of it is what it is. Did you notice it sounds like what you say, Raka? It sounds like the sound you make before you're going to spit on somebody. You worthless piece of... To spit on someone is an ultimate sign of contempt. I have no use for you, you worthless piece of... Jesus says, when you move to that place, your anger, you begin to let it take over. Now, of course, some of you will hear that and you'll think, well, then it's a good thing that I don't use the kind of words that do those kind of things. I don't curse. I don't say those kind of words. I don't do those kind of things. But you get that Jesus isn't getting at the words you say. He's using that as an example of the kind of indulging of anger. And humans have infinite numbers of ways to let other people know how angry we are. I can let you know I'm angry by the way I look at you or the way I don't look at you. I can let you know the way that I'm angry with you by the way I put my hands on you or the way I never put my hands on you. I can let you know that I am angry at you by the way I talk to you or the way I never talk to you. I can let you know that I have contempt for you by the way that I am with you or the way I'm never with you. I can say things to you. I can be passive aggressive toward you, and all of these, Jesus would condemn because they all move to where I take my will and I place it above the will of God, which is for me to will the good of another. But let me just be clear. Once more, Jesus is not giving a new set of rules. He's illustrating what exactly does it look like to live in a life that's been altered by the power and presence of God, to live life in God's kingdom where love is always the ultimate aim of every action that we have. And you're just so full of it all the time. That's what happens. And what begins to happen is inside out, I'm so full of the love and power and presence and the generosity and the mercy of God that the things that used to come out of me don't come out of me anymore. Instead, I will the good of others. See, you can never avoid anger by trying to not be angry. If the heart isn't changed, if the heart doesn't get changed, anger will leak out of you in 1,000 ways that will do damage to others, and they will do damage to you as well. See, what we're seeing is that living in Jesus' kingdom, life in the presence and power of God, that is his ultimate life hack for dealing with our anger. What does it look like to live a life that's so transformed that it transforms our angry hearts from the inside out? See, Jesus begins by talking about this, by saying these are the things that it never does. You don't live the kind of heart that would do harm to other people, even by saying destructive things about the other person. You certainly would not ever murder them, but you wouldn't even be angry with them long enough to say hurtful things about them. Then he begins to go into what positive kind of examples of what it does look like. He goes from these two negative ones to some positive examples. And just like these, I want to say up front, these positive examples are not rules or laws either. They are positive examples of what the overflow of a life filled with the power and presence of God does. First, he says, you need to understand that reconciling a broken relationship is a high-level priority of worship for our God. I used to say to people that reconciling relationships was a higher priority than worship to God. But I've come to understand that when I operate in love toward other people, that is a life of worship, an everyday moment of worship. And it itself, when I reconcile, is an act of worship to God as I reconcile and will the good between me and another person. Jesus gives an illustration of this. He says, you're bringing your gift at the altar, or you're in worship, you're singing. And you remember somebody has a problem with you. Now notice, Jesus doesn't get into whether they rightly have a problem with you or they're just wrong and they just have a problem with you because they have a problem with you. Jesus says, doesn't really matter. He goes, the heart that has been changed by the life of God, he says, you go and you do reconciliation. Why? Because that's what love requires. That's what love does. That's what you do when you will the good of the other person. The person in the kingdom of God, in the power and presence of God, they value other people even more than religious obligations because they understand it's an act of worship to God. You know, I have found recently in my life, the primary thing that causes me to be angry, is when it's my addiction, really, to my plan. You know my plan? My plan is the things I want, the way I want them, when I want them, how I want them. And I've come to notice more and more that the things that really frustrate me, that piss me off, that get me to the point that I don't like the way that I feel, or the things that I wind up doing, the things that get me there primarily are things when my will is not done in my way at the time I want it, how I want it. Though nothing really wrong has happened, I'm angry because my plan didn't get accomplished the way that I wanted. I found out recently that this is the biggest issue for me. When that doesn't happen, even if there's nothing wrong, I feel angry about it. And I begin to think things like, stupid stuff, stupid people. Why can't stupid people do what they know they need to do? In fact, that's why lines have always been a problem for me. Standing in line has never made sense to me because I'm addicted to hurry and worry, and my plan needs to get done faster. In a line, stupid people in stupid lines waiting for stupid managers to open more stupid checkout counters. That stupidity. Why isn't this stupid thing moving faster? See, here's the thing. That comes from me being addicted to me and to my plan and what could have happened if I could have been the only person and they just taken care of me with what I know that I deserve. And when anything gets in the way of me getting what I want in the way that I want it, when I want it, how that I want it, then whatever happens is fair game. Instead, Jesus is inviting me to a life where I live in the kingdom and I die to me, to my ego, to life for myself, for my plan being done in my way, in my time, how I want it. And I live in the reality. I just recognize the reality that I cannot force, by the power of my enormous will, a line to move faster. I cannot control the weather. I cannot control any one person around me. I cannot control their will. I do not have the power, by no amount of enormous effort I make, to control everyone that's around me. But that's okay because I live in the power and presence of a really good God who is with me and who loves me. And I can let go of everything that is not in my control, and I can actually decide to will the good of the people around me, including the people who may have something against me. So I want to say something to you a moment about reconciliation. Reconciling is almost always complicated. It takes time, and it may require multiple conversations and numbers of years. And even when you do it right, it may not come to the outcome you want. The reason to be part of reconciliation is not something that you can It's not to get to the goal that you control. Reconciliation is often also in the hand of the other person, and they may never be willing to do this. So I want to address those of you who find yourself in situations where you feel like you've tried, and you find yourself being in a place where when you hear the words of Jesus coming at you, you begin to rationalize. But this is not my problem. They are the person with the problem, and they don't want this to happen. And so there's nothing I can do about this. And you sit and you hear Jesus, and you have convinced yourself that because it's the other person's problem, you have obeyed Jesus because you don't feel bad toward them. You don't want anything bad to them to happen. In fact, they don't matter to you anymore. Do you not see where that is? Do you not see that because you don't have emotion toward a person, because you don't think about them every moment anymore, it is not the same as willing the good of another. See, what Jesus is talking about is that we live so much in the power and presence of God that I don't just avoid contempt for the other person. It's not that I just don't hurt them. It's not that I don't call them names anymore. But I have to move to the point that I want what is good for them and for me. And what I'm saying to you is, though you may never be able to reconcile this thing, we have to stop allowing ourselves to rationalize that just because I have stopped the angry thoughts, I have obeyed the teaching of Jesus. Don't kid yourself into thinking that that's what he's asking. You can't control the outcome, but you can give your heart to reconciliation, and it is an act of worship to God. See, Jesus pushes us a little more, and he says, we actually should initiate genuine kindness toward your enemy. And the illustration he uses is a courtroom. Suppose, he says, someone is taking you to court, and they're trying to take money from you that you know you don't deserve, and every time you think about it, you just get angry. He says, settle matters quickly. And the word he actually uses is make friends with them while there's still time. In other words, you genuinely try to understand where they're coming from, and you try to move this matter forward. You generally want what's best for them and for you. Now, that not mean that you do what they want. That may involve some kind of legal kind of thing. Again, Jesus is not giving a new law here. He's saying that you want to be the kind of person that love flows out of you because you're just full of the Spirit of God, that you do things all the way to the point of you know you're doing what is best for the other person. And I know some of you have been through really difficult things, maybe with somebody at work, maybe with somebody at school, maybe with an ex-spouse. Jesus says, pray for them. Ask God to show you what kindness you could do for them. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, not because you think somehow it will earn you something with God, not out of manipulation, but out of willing the good of the other person. Maybe there isn't anything you can do, but you ask God to show you if there is. The main point with these two examples, to seek reconciliation and to do kindness for an enemy, is that not that you do these exact behaviors. They're not new laws. It's that I will the good of the other person. See, Jesus is asking us to ponder. What would my life look like toward the people around me that get in the way of what I wish had happened, what I want to happen, how I want it to go, what I want my will to be? He's asking me to ponder, what would it look like if I were so full of the love and concern of God that I willed the good of the other person? What would happen if I was so full of the power and presence of God? What would I do in those situations? What would that look like? I should give enough thought to that I ponder that. He's asking that for your life. So here's how I want to end this. I want you to bring to mind an actual person or an actual situation that often frustrates you or that you're angry with or where you have no reconciliation. I want you to bring it to your mind, a place where your will is not accomplished because you're human, you get frustrated in that, which is a nice word for anger. I'm going to pray for you as I end my part in this. And I'm going to give you some time to ponder this. And as you ponder it, I'm going to pray that the Spirit of God will help you see what you can do to will the good in that situation. And as you begin to live in the power and presence of God, God will lead you into the kind of life because you will just be full of it, His power and His presence. And when I'm done praying, then we're going to listen to a video that talks about the power of words and power of words to do evil, and then the power of God's words for us to transform us. And then we're going to worship the example of one who lived his life constantly in the power and presence of God. You got a person's name, a face in mind? Let's bow together, and I'll pray for all of us. Now, Father, I pray that you will help us all know what we should do in the situations we have in mind, the people we have in mind, that we will allow your power and presence to flow through us, and that like you will good for these people in these situations, we would will the good of these people. And more than that, God, would you show us what we could do? What can we do? Would you open our mind toward that? Are there words we need to say? Are there things we need to do? Father, thank you for your love for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.